Amanda, what are you doing here?
Yeah, what are you doing here? It's so great to see you.
It's crazy. Great to see you as well.
Looks like someone didn't make it in yet.
Well, now it's our show.
Yeah, now it's our show. I know all about the Google leak. I'm very technical. No, I'm super pumped to dive into this because I'm not an SEO, right? Like I know some things about SEO, but I'm more so a content marketer and marketing generalist. So super excited to learn about this from both you and Rand in a way that there he is, Rand. You were able to come after all.
I figured maybe this was going to be an important one and I should show up for it.
Yeah, it's good that you're here.
Also, I'm still editing one slide, so just don't mind me.
See, this is why Rand is such a good guy. Like I would have just been doing it and acting like everything's good. I would have just been like looking to the side, editing the slide, not saying anything.
I have that whatchamacallit, like camera empathy, right? Where I constantly am perceiving myself through a camera and then thinking of, well, that guy looks like a dick. Why is he doing that? I gotta, I don't know. I don't know what it is. Just from years of like Whiteboard Fridays or something.
Whereas whenever I'm on like a Zoom call, I'm looking at myself and being like, huh, you look good today.
You're a handsome devil. What's your name? Amazing. All right. So the only thing I need to do is make this link to that, and then we are ready to go. Welcome, by the way, everyone, to SparkToro's office hours. We are very excited to have you with us. It is one of our most popular webinars by registrants so far, and I think that is because of the caliber of the guest that we have today and the exciting things that he has been able to do and that we've been able to do together. So Amanda, we always get a question before. We always get two questions.
Yeah. Let's get two questions.
What are the two questions we always get?
The first question is, Rand, is that Lost and Founder behind you? That's great product placement. People should probably check out that book.
Do you see If You Can't Take the Heat is right underneath it?
Also a terrific book.
Wait. I think I can focus. If I refocus the camera, there you go. I'm out of focus. The books are in focus.
Nice.
The second question we often get is, will the recording be available? Yes, it will, friends. As soon as this webinar is over, the recording will be available on this very page. And in a couple hours, you will also get a follow-up email that has the link to this recording, as well as a PDF of the slides.
Amazing. And Amanda, will you tell our kind audience, especially folks who are new to SparkToro office hours, what they can and should expect in the chat and the Q&A? Oh,
yes. The chat is one of my favorite parts of our office hours because we have all of you lovely folks chiming in here. So rules of the chat are participate, right? Drop in some insights or notes if you have them. You can drop questions if you want to. Usually, Rand tries to be pretty good about trying to address questions real time if it's salient to the current slide. Otherwise, you can use the Q&A tab in that same little window and drop in your questions, and that'll help us. And that, by the way, if you want to ask a question or if you're looking at this, make sure to upvote questions that you want to see answered, because that will help us prioritize like the order in which you will answer questions.
Absolutely. Well, we have a ton to get through today, and I want to let folks know that I'm going to share my entire screen. That one. Let folks know that we are almost certainly going to run a little bit long today. And so my suggestion, I never use Google Slides. What do I do here? All right, there we go. And hide that. Oh, beautiful. Great. So We will probably go about 10 or 15 minutes over and answer folks' questions. Mike has kindly agreed to stay with us a little bit over the hour, so you can expect that the recording will likely be 70, 75 minutes. And if you need to drop off before then, of course, don't worry about it. You can catch the recording later. It'll be emailed to you. Also, we're going to try and make sure that we get through all of the incredible findings that we've got in here from the Google leak before that time is up. So welcome. Thrilled to have you with us. Very excited to get to do this. All right. So Mike King is the founder and CEO of iPullRank. Mike, you and I have known each other for a dozen years, more than a dozen years.
Yeah, I think it's about 13 now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely incredible. We have become not only colleagues, but good friends as well. Mike and his family and Geraldine and I have gotten to get together regularly. And so, of course, when I get this anonymous source reaching out to me saying, hey, I have 14,000 attributes that are, the secret sauce of how Google's ranking algorithm works, I call the man who is best for the job. And that is this man right here. Mike, we are honored and thrilled to have you with us. For folks who don't know, can you just tell them briefly a little about what iPullRank does and what this upcoming book that you're working on is?
Yeah. So iPullRank, we're a digital marketing agency based here in New York City. We primarily do technical SEO, content strategy, and generative AI work. We mostly work with enterprise brands and mid-market brands. And my book coming soon is The Science of SEO. And I like to think of it as like the computer science book for SEOs. That's really talking more about like information retrieval and things like that. And, all the research I've done for this book really, I feel like I've been training for the last few years for this moment, for us to like get this esoteric set of documents, because I have so much information and knowledge based on, my experience in the space and all the research to really contextualize what we saw in these documents.
That is exactly what is sort of the dream come true, because I'll be honest, as I went through most of the documents, the features, the naming conventions, the structure was just completely foreign to me, and I knew that you would be able to translate. So I truly appreciate that. These documents, you can see some photos from the last 13 years of our friendship together. And the original post is also linked to, Mike's got a couple of great posts on iPullRank.com that you can check out on his blog. I want to just, speaking of contextualization, start by saying what's actually in here. And basically there are, if you haven't spent some time in the documents themselves, they're hosted on Hexdocs. You can play around with that. This is what it looks like. And you can see it's pretty dense. It's challenging to read. It is written for internal Google engineers who work on the search team. It's documentation for them to describe the features and attributes that they can call as they build, code and structures and systems, and modify rankings and all that kind of stuff. Modify how the ranking algorithm works.
Yeah, what I've been telling folks is that it's the ingredients, not the recipe. It's all the components that are being used as part of all these different products in Google. Primarily search. About 8,000 of these are for search.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, one of the things that's interesting to me, I did not publish this because I couldn't validate it from a secondary source. However, one of the Google engineers, ex-Google engineers that I talked to confirm the document's authenticity off the record. This is someone who left Google, who didn't have access to it when they initially, when they were working at Google. They were working on a different team, but they were like, yes, this almost certainly is, authentic Google documentation, which of course Google search confirmed later the next week. But what they said to me, Mike, I think I might have mentioned this to you, Mike, but is that this isn't just the ingredients. This is all the ingredients. Mm-hmm. It's essentially a comprehensive set. There are references to some other, systems. For example, there's a reference to like the Freebase, the internal Freebase API, which has a whole bunch of, it has like 21 million different labels for topics, right, and entities, and that documentation is not here. It's in a separate API, but it shows you everything. And the more I have looked at this, the more that other people have looked at this, I think this is comprehensive, which is shocking. Like, it is mind-blowing to think that we have our hands on it. All right. So, Mike, let's get into it. We broke this up, everyone, into 3 different sections. What should people start doing? What should we stop doing? And what should we experiment with or test? So we're going to start with the start doing section. Tell me about this. So traffic first, rankings later, which is, when I was in SEO, especially for the first like 10, 15 years, it was all about SEO was the first traffic I ever got. If you did a good job optimizing a site, you rank in Google and you get traffic. And now we're sort of in reverse world. So what is this? What's going on here, Mike?
Yeah, so what we're finding in these documents is that Google is using a variety of ways to validate whether or not a page should be considered for ranking, right? And so, one of the things that they reference, and also in some of the other documentation that we were able to find from other leaks, is that they use Chrome to determine like what is an important page. And they use a lot of the data from Chrome to say, okay, users are liking these pages. And so let's make sure that we are surfacing these pages in search, because we're seeing a variety of other corroborating signals across the web to indicate that these are important pages. So, it's not enough to just like get the ranking. You want to make sure that Google sees other signals to indicate like this is a good page for users.
A couple of folks in the comments brought up, Keegan specifically brought up paid traffic. I didn't see a filter. Maybe you call one. I didn't see a filter in the documentation that says don't count paid traffic when we call Chrome traffic. Granted, it could be somewhere else.
Yeah, right. There's no indication of any difference. It just says Chrome in total specifically. And also in the rank boost or real-time boost design documents, it just says data from Chrome. So there's no indication of it being like from a specific channel. It's just that it's data that's captured about this site from Chrome.
Yeah. So one thing I want to point out here is that, so someone mentioned that Google has said for years that they don't count paid traffic. And I would just be super skeptical of any statement Google's ever made. If this documentation, which clearly, it disproves just dozens of statements that they have made over the years, things where they swore, after taking an oath before Congress that they didn't use Chrome traffic data. And then you're like, well, you sure do, right? You absolutely do. So granted, the person who made that maybe didn't know, right? Or whoever is making, I don't know if John Mueller has any idea what's in here. He might never have seen this, right? Mm-hmm. Like he might not have access to it for plausible PR deniability reasons. But I would just say, test it. Like I think the paid thing, Mike, for years, people have been talking about how paid traffic is correlated with a rankings boost. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's why. Okay, so I made this quick example. So the New Yorker wrote about us. They used S.E.O, which is just goddamn embarrassing. Nothing makes you look like a, I don't know, generation that is not mine than that. But they wrote a really nice article about us. And the leak suggests that if we were to drive traffic to this page, that would help boost the value that it passes. Granted, this probably already got a sizable amount of traffic, but you can imagine a PR and content and link building strategy that is, if I get a link somewhere and it's in a quiet part of the internet, I'm going to personally drive traffic to from my email, my social list. That's certainly something Amanda and I are planning on doing more of, especially when people link to us, in nice places. A podcast that we're on, where the page links to SparkToro, says something nice about audience research, but is probably not getting much traffic of its own because everybody's listening on Spotify or YouTube or whatever. So you can do this via other channels too. This Brian Wood called us out, Mike, on LinkedIn and pointed out this example that he did years ago for Wayfair when he was the head of SEO for that company, and ran this Wayfair My Sofa campaign, this search campaign. So Can you talk a little about the relationship between branded searches and potentially rankings and traffic?
Yeah, so there's just some clear indications that, if your brand is getting searched a lot, it yields a lot of other signals. So when we talk about nav boost, which is one of the key systems that's used to look at clicks and so on, they have this idea of what are called reference queries. And so typically your branded terms are going to be these reference queries. I mean, they're not going to be the only ones, but they're going to be the ones that you have control over through doing more of these like branded activation. So when you run a ad where you tell people like Google Wayfair my sofa or something to that effect, you're going to create a lot more of these reference queries, which is also going to yield a lot more of what are called long clicks. So the more successful user signals that indicate that people are looking for your brand. And so when you roll up a lot of these reference queries on a domain level, that's going to send a signal that says like, okay, this domain is worthwhile broadly in search. And so you're going to get more opportunities to rank than a page that or a website that doesn't create a lot of these. So when we talk about brand, this is just a opportunity to broadly make your site more powerful in ways that Google is looking to measure that isn't just like links and do you have the right content? And so these signals are just a lot more difficult to gain because it requires, a lot of user behavior to change in your benefit for your website.
Yeah. Someone was asking and speculating in the comments that GA, Google Analytics, might be part of this. I didn't see anything about Google Analytics, just
No.
Chrome.
Yeah, there was no indication that GA data was pulled in at all.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me about this.
So from my perspective, I think one of the key things that we need to start doing is using more clickstream data as part of what we're doing in SEO. And I think historically, clickstream data has been seen as like not real data, but really it's the best that we got in order to have some sort of a proxy for what it is that Google is measuring. And so effectively, we want to get a better understanding of where do people go when they leave our site. And, there's no other way to get that than using data like this. And so when we go back and think about like the evolution of Google, the Google toolbar was one of these ways that they tracked this previously. And then they were like, hey, why don't we build a browser so we can get all the information about where people are going? So when we look at this example here, this is specifically for SparkToro. A lot of your people left and came to us in this last month because of this story that we broke. And it just goes to show that there is an indication for Google, like, okay, both of these sites are related and they're both sites that people want to see right now. So I suspect that we both saw a pretty significant boost in organic search because of these signals. So having, this be kind of incorporated with SEO, I think is what we all need to be doing moving forward. And I think, again, historically, this just hasn't been something that SEO has thought about.
I'll show you one of the craziest things that happened to us in the recent past, which is I'm going to do a search for audience research software. So we always ranked like, I don't know, number 15, 16 for this until the leak. And now we are number one organic for audience research software.
Yay!
Which is kind of awesome. We also started ranking extremely highly for audience research tools. I think we're number one organic.
And for those that don't know, Rand refuses to do SEO for SparkToro.
Nope. Yeah.
We dropped down a little bit, but like during the peak of this news, we got the number one spot back for a 0-click content. We lost it again, but I do want to call out something, a correlation here, or something similar. So on this note of like bad clicks and stuff, I remember a couple years ago, Jimmy Donaldson, aka Mr. Beast, I believe he had said that he stopped promoting his YouTube videos on Twitter because he felt like it was bad quality traffic and that like the YouTube algorithm didn't like it, because it would show up people like his fans on Twitter clicking on the video, watching it, and then leaving YouTube. And he
Mhm.
felt like YouTube didn't like it. So I feel like that's just, a correlation here, right?
Yeah, it's the same sort of idea. So there is some indication of that sort of stuff in the YouTube section of the documentation as well. So it's really this idea that Google is using click behavior across all its products. So one of the things I've been doing lately is reading that book In the Plex, and they explicitly talk about this. Like, we use clicks everywhere. And it's just the only way at scale for them to understand user success. So it's so ridiculous to me that all this time they've been like, yeah, we don't use clicks. It's like, obviously you have to use clicks, because otherwise how can you verify this level of understanding of content? And so, to the point that you're making about Mr. Beast, what was happening with them is that he's driving these clicks from Twitter, and then there's like a short watch time, and watch time is like one of the key metrics that is used in the YouTube ranking factors. So you don't want to drive more bad quality traffic, just like you don't want to drive more users who are not going to sign up.
Yeah,
absolutely. So in this case, right, you're sort of recommending looking at how you perform versus others.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a number of tools that provide this on the URL level. I know SEMrush, their .trends tool, SimilarWeb does, and I'm going to imagine, is it Datos or Datos, whatever the people you guys use, they can provide it at scale via their APIs and so on. So my whole point here is that we can get a sense of how things are actually performing on other sites, and then that can inform your competitive analysis from a UX perspective. Like, what is it about a competing page that is yielding people staying on that site for those same keywords that you're trying to rank for? Because if they have some sort of UX element that is, more sticky, then that's something that you should also have on your site. And what I'm encouraging the people to do is adopt more of those like table of contents things, so they can drive the user directly to what their answer is. And also, if you're like a recipe site, like, I don't care about, your grandma's life story. Like, just give me the recipe. That's what the user wants. And when we talk about this idea of like a successful session, it's not just did the user click on your page, it's did they click and stay there? And also, if they didn't click and stay there, did they go and perform a different search? Because that could also be an indication of a poor performing search. So, if someone lands on your site and they stay there for 2 minutes because they're looking around for the recipe and they don't find the recipe and they go back and click on another result, that is also an indication of a bad session, even though you look at it and see like, oh, it's a low bounce. They stayed for 2 minutes. So it's not as simple as what we may have historically thought of it as. You also got to think about like what are users doing when they go back to the SERP?
Yeah. The pogo sticking, the searcher satisfaction, that appears to be huge from this data. So one of the things that comes out of this again and again, you can see I see a ton in my LinkedIn feed, right, around like, well, this is just reinforcing all these things around brand, make people prefer your brand. So they search with your brand, the Wayfair My Sofa thing, or the don't get them to search for audience research software, get them to search for SparkToro, which is, what Amanda and I really focus on. But so I thought we'd put some actionable stuff in here around this. I am going to recommend that naming conventions are one of the biggest and most important things that you can do. Also, embarrassingly, and I am guilty of this myself, particularly with my years in SEO, SEOs are often horrible at naming things. Like, horrible. Even the big publications in the world of search, SE Journal and Search Engine Land and SE Roundtable, and the naming convention stuff, we're just not great at it. Like, honestly, I think iPullRank is one of the best brand names in our space.
It really is.
Yeah, and well, but that the bar is just not. It's not high enough. Like, we need to raise that bar, I think, in that field in particular. I would recommend against these kinds of generic names. Historically, they were things that people in SEO recommended. Like, call your brand or your product what the searcher searches for generically. And I would suggest that is a very poor idea in a world of entities and a world of mentions being important and brand connections happening.
So
I linked to the
rebrand to audience research near me. Okay, I'll cancel the plans.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, listen, I have one of the most generic names in the world, so I've always tried to like do things that stand out when I name things.
Oh,
Like you can't search
interesting.
for me. If you
That's
search for my
interesting.
name, you're gonna get like the New York Yankees player. You're gonna get Martin Luther King Jr. because that was his name when he was born. You're gonna get random authors. You're never gonna get me unless you add like rapper to it or SEO to it.
Yeah, fascinating.
Ah,
Huh. I had never thought about the fact that the genericness of one's human name also means that you have to do brand building around that. That's, yeah, pretty easy to be the top Rand Fishkin in Google. Let me tell you, not a challenge. So when it comes to brand stuff, patterning, consistency, I won't spend a bunch of time on this, but I think Campari is a great example here if you're looking for someone who like always keeps that brand consistency through 200 years of history. And if you are trying to compete in spaces like this, my recommendation would be like what Leopold Brothers did here when they launched a Campari competitor, right? A bitter red aperitivo, but it's an American version. I think it's fantastic, by the way, if you want to make your Negroni a little bit up-leveled. And when they created it, they went out and marketed their new product through all the sources of influence that talked about Campari. So basically, any place where there was Campari recipes, coverage, advertising, brand marketing, that's where Leopold Brothers went. This is exactly what SparkToro helps people do, but you can see, thanks to the leak, that it is actually incredibly valuable for SEO in addition to audience building and marketing through sources of influence. So even if you don't care about the kind of marketing that we do and you only care about SEO, this is still a great tip. Mainstream press helps too, but I would argue way more difficult to get here into the New York Times than it is to get into Punch Drink and VinePair and Go 750 and Eater and Gear Patrol, all those kinds of places. Google loves rewarding products that are synonymous with categories. You can see this all across the rankings. You can see this not just in the leak, but in any study around SEO and how much traffic is going to the top sites. And so this is, I think, this is showing we have a long way to go, right?
Yep.
Like no one is searching for audience research and SparkToro, and that's something that over time we want to associate with our brand. We do a ton of things to do that, but one of the easiest things that I do, and I would recommend everyone do this, is actually I'll show you. I'll just drag a. So this page that I've got here. Okay, so you see, so this is my like speaking in contact page, and if you scroll down, I have my biography for professional events, and I make sure that SparkToro, makers of fine audience research software, is right there. And Mike, my understanding is in the leak, they say that they look for text around the anchor and associate that with the entity mention, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So my hope is essentially you see this and you see SparkToro, and then you get rankings from that, and that's something that everyone republishes.
Not only that, like you said, like people will copy and paste that for you on their sites. And so Google starts to see it in multiple places. And then that affects like what they associate with those entities. So it's definitely a great way to do it. And also like for anyone that's doing things like guest posting still, not that I'm hating on it, but if you're doing that, like be more strategic about the word usage around your linking so that those entities can be associated with the sites that you're building links to.
Mike, Zoe asked, and I think this is a really smart question. Was there indication in the documentation how distant those words would be, how far they'd calculate it from the anchor?
No, it doesn't say that. It just says that it's looking at what's to the left and to the right of the anchor.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, interesting. Oops. So yeah, this human satisfaction thing, the quality rater data being in there directly was a huge surprise to me, right? I think we all suspected that would not be the case. Yeah, can you talk a little about how this is affecting UI UX?
Absolutely. So it's an attribute called golden, and it's basically an indication of whether or not the given page is a golden document, one that was rated highly by the quality raters. So what they do is they feed that to a classifier so they can use that to determine the quality of websites. And so if you are, building pages that are following the quality raters guidelines, then you have a higher likelihood of matching whatever's in that classifier. So to that end, you want to kind of better understand the QRG. And I'll tell you from my own perspective, I hated that document. I didn't want to read that boring thing. Like, I've kind of ignored it for the last few years. And, when I see people like Cyrus Shepard, who became a quality rater, I'm like, how did you pass that test? Because that document is so boring to me. But, it's just an indication that we do need to be paying more attention to it, because Google has always said, like, oh, yeah, what they're doing isn't affecting rankings. But as we now know, it is informing the data set that Google is using to improve their classifiers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when you see, I am starting to see, as you mentioned, Mike, right? I'm starting to see these recipe sites that don't provide a whole lot of detail. They just go straight to the recipe, ranking higher and higher. Personally, I kind of appreciate that. Like the PCC recipe for tagliatelle porcini, damn good. Very, very good, in fact. And, this, I think, speaks to what you talked about with your like jobs to be done as part of the content process. So if we have these ranking inputs measuring satisfaction via all of these systems, right, you're going to get eventually content that satisfies searchers at the top. Do we have any idea about this sort of testing, right, experimentation, the thing that we see with Google all the time, which is like they sort of, your page gets to rank for a little while and then it kind of settles into a position?
There's no clear indications of that specifically in the documentation, but I think we all kind of know that just from the experiences that we've had as algorithm updates roll out. Like from my perspective, whenever an algorithm update rolls out, like I'm never going to be the person that's like, here's what happened, because there's a lot of people that will write about it as soon as something rolls out. That doesn't make sense to me, because Google is a software company, and software companies roll things out in Agile and whatever. And so when they do that, they may roll back components of it. So I never look at anything until at least 2 weeks have gone by, which from my perspective is usually like the time frame that something might be in review. And so I would say at least wait 2 weeks to see like how things have settled, and then start doing your measurements around like, okay, what adjustments might have happened here.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to bring up someone asked in the comments that they had joined late. I suspect some other folks have joined late. Yes, the recording will be made available. It'll be emailed to you shortly after this seminar is done. We are going a little bit long today. We're going to go about 75 minutes, and Mike has kindly agreed to stay. So, the measuring. So Cyrus wrote about this, right? That that essentially the quality rater data is getting classified. I think that's pretty wild. What does this low effort thing mean?
Yeah, so it looks like they're just trying to estimate the effort required to generate the content that they're looking at. And I think that's really smart. With the advent of generative AI, everyone is spinning up millions of pages, saying the same thing over and over. So it looks like Google is saying, okay, how can we measure the effort of this page and then use that downstream to determine whether or not this is a page that should rank? Which to me, it makes sense, but they're also kind of looking to compare it against what they're seeing from the quality raters as well, so they can better model whether or not a page is Gen AI and also not valuable to users.
Yeah, I think that's probably a very smart plan, especially since Google really needs lots of human content on the web. If they don't get it, then the generative AI thing falls apart pretty fast.
Yeah, and that also tells us that they can't reliably detect it on its own, right? Like they're having to model it against what user behavior is saying. And that was my original point, like, I don't know, a year or so ago when I wrote a blog post. It was like, generative AI isn't the threat that they want you to make it out to be or whatever, because no one can reliably detect it. Like, it's replicating how we write. So you can't really use an algorithm that'll, with enough confidence detect that it is generative AI content. So you've got to use the signals from users based on their satisfaction to determine whether or not it's Gen AI content.
Interesting. Okay. I don't know if you guys get this. Maybe everyone in the comments can tell me I'm wrong, but I feel like I can spot it every time now. Like when someone sends me, for example, I have a friend who emails me sometimes and uses ChatGPT to basically like take their offhand comments and turn it into like an actual more thoughtful email. And I can always tell, like, and when I land on a page, I'm like, start reading an article. I can kind of always tell. I read a lot of indie game news, and there's a few publications that have started just Gen AI-ing like Steam reviews and that kind of stuff. I don't know.
Rain, are you telling us that you don't want to delve into their testaments?
I can't even put my finger on it, right? It's like a feeling. It's that uncanny valley of human, non-human things. Okay. So yeah, tell me about this recommendation that you've got here.
Yeah, so there's a gentleman by the name of, I don't know how to say his name. I think it's Elias Dabis. He wrote a very popular Python library called AdverTools, and it's very much like, the go-to library for SEO stuff in Python. And so in the last 100 days, he's been doing this thing he calls like the 100 days of code. And he's just been making these little tools every day and, making them available. So he's built this tool for a content evaluation using ChatGPT. And basically he's taking in all the evaluation questions from the Quality Raters Guideline and then asking ChatGPT to review that content and say, true or false, this is meeting the expectations of this definition. So it's just a good way to, at scale, get some of that like qualitative analysis. And of course, you're going to need to like spot check it because ChatGPT is still ChatGPT. But nevertheless, it's like a good directional way to say, like, all right, let's review all the content and see how it maps to the Quality Raters Guidelines. And so not only is this a tool that you can, throw content into, you put in the page title, you put in the article text, and then it gives you basically a table telling you like, how does it map to it? But he's also made it open source so that you could effectively like turn this into a crawler to review, your whole site if you wanted to. Yeah.
Awesome. Very, very cool find. All right. Study them results. So what are we basically seeing here? Oops, I think we've got,
Yeah, one of the things that I found especially compelling is that they have this idea where content of certain types will be limited for how many items can show up in the SERP. So as an example, let's say, video SERPs, they'll only show 3, right? Or commercial content, they'll only show 2, or informational content, they'll only show 5, or whatever it is. And so I think it's valuable for SEOs to be looking at those SERPs and saying like, okay, well, my piece of content is an informational piece, and all the things that are informational here are like, very high link metrics. They have very high click metrics. So it's not likely that I'm going to get into this SERP with this informational content. So, I think what we're seeing here is that there are some opportunities for SEO software to evolve, right? Like incorporating the clickstream metrics, analyzing the content in the SERPs, not just showing me like, here's the SERP features, like crawling these pages and saying, okay, this is informational content. There's 5 pieces of informational content. You're not going to get in here. So I think there's just more opportunity for us to be more strategic about the keywords that we go after based on the limitations that Google has and how it constructs the SERPs.
Oh, I love this thinking, Mike. I was thinking, SparkToro is about to launch. We haven't quite launched it yet, but like a pages that appear in all the keywords that people search for around an audience. And yeah, I wonder if Casey could get it so that we could categorize by like brand, informational, navigational, like all that stuff. That would be sick.
It would.
Whoa.
It would. Yeah, I think that excuse me, there's so much value in that because those sorts of classifications are not so difficult, right? Like I think the gap in what SEO software does and what it should do is closed by a whole bunch of people that do like Python SEO things and like create all these libraries. So there's a lot of opportunity for someone else to come into the space and like do these things natively because so many people have to like recreate the wheel on all these ideas.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So things we should stop doing. Things that we have done that we should stop doing. All right. Link building, like give me how is Google devaluing certain types of links?
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on this before, like this idea of where content lives in the index um, gives some sense of like what the value is of the links from those pages. So as an example here, well, not an example, the way the index is stratified, you have pages that are really important, meaning that they rank well, they get a lot of traffic, and so Google has to have them easily accessible. So they live in memory within the Google index, right? Because memory is going to be the fastest. And then you have a layer down, which they're calling like type medium quality. Those live on solid state drive. That's going to be, the next fastest accessing of that content. And then you have what's basically like the content graveyard, which is their low quality stuff, which lives on like standard, HDD drives, right? And so then you have another section, which is fresh docs, which I'm just assuming is going to be content from like news publications and things like that. And so there is no metrics to my knowledge in our space that accounts for that, right? Like the proxy would be, does this page rank well for a lot of keywords, and does this page drive traffic? So what you're seeing in the table there is me trying to come up with a composite metric based on source type. So what I've done here is I've pulled the URL rating, the domain rating, the traffic, the keyword rankings, and then use that with different weightings on each of those metrics to come up with a composite score. So as you can see here, example 2, the URL example 2 has a URL rating of 60, a DR of 50, and then a traffic of 1500. But the rankings are 8, 9, and 3 for the keywords. So when we weight these in this composite metric, we find that has the highest score out of all 3 of these. So that would be the URL that I would want my links from if I'm comparing between the 3. So, it's something I'm going to share with the community in hopes that these SEO software companies like add something like this so that we can have a comparison that goes beyond like these approximations of PageRank and goes more into these things that we're finding in the documentation link.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. And I mean, the rough thing here, like one of my big takeaways is, if you hired an agency or a consultant to do link building and they are getting you a bunch of links and you look at the pages that they got you links from, and those pages are almost certainly not getting traffic, you should probably not work with that agency or consultant, right? Like it is probably not the case that something that has pages that have no traffic have a lot of ranking value.
So yeah, I think that's the caveat there, because I think we all know that link volume can work, because it does work. Like we've seen that for years. But if you get like, I'm gonna imagine if you get like 1,000 of these low quality links, like that will move the needle for you. But what we're learning here is that if we get 5 of the high quality links, those will move the needle better. And so don't you ultimately want more traffic? Like, I don't care if it's traffic from referral or from organic search, like you want more traffic. So from my perspective, the only links that we're going to build are going to be these high quality links.
Yeah. I mean, it seems very likely this is the way to go. Okay. Lots of people, ourselves included, put many topics on one site. As an example, I noticed, so I'm quite embarrassed about this because I believe Amanda and I and our friend Andrew, our friend Scott, Geraldine, a bunch of us contribute to this best damn food and drink gift guide every year. We've done it for 4 years in a row. It sits on SparkToro's blog. It is totally irrelevant to all the rest of our content, but we love small indie businesses, and we promote this, in my opinion, great guide. Way better than all of these guides. No offense to whatever, the comments on Reddit or the Eater guide, but all of the rest of these are driven by affiliate revenue. Literally, right? Like you have to scroll to page 15 before you find non-affiliate stuff. Ours are just, this stuff is great. And we have, anyway, we don't rank anywhere for it. On page 7, I found the first guide that was not an affiliate thing. It's from Metafilter. We are not in the top 100 pages or the top 1,000 results.
Wow.
For this at all.
Ouch.
Yeah, we don't rank to save our lives. You can see I searched for exactly the title tag of it, Best Damn Food and Drink Gift Guide 2023. There's a mention of it from Facebook, a Threads post about it, and a LinkedIn post about it. No, the document itself can't rank for crap.
Wait, Rand. How many people do we have in here? Why don't we just get them all to search for it, find it, and click it?
Yeah, we have over 600 people right now.
All right. If you are willing to perform a search and do this, I guess we could try it. We could certainly try it. So here's the thing. I can't find it in Google, like, to save my life. So I know that if you search for the URL exactly, Google will show that they've indexed it. But
why don't we? And I think it could be a good piece of information, new information, if we did like a site colon search with it, and then did best food gift guide, and obviously it would come up then. But if the clicks would yield like an additional signal across the site that Google would leverage.
SparkToro gift guide. All right, so it comes up if you search for our brand name, which is nice. But if you take this, at least as of yesterday when I took the screenshot. Oh, thank God, it's ranking now. All right, now let's go. Food and Drink Gift Guide 2023. I scrolled for pages. Oh, look, we're ranking there too. What happened? What's different today? All right, yeah. So if you can find it, go ahead and give it a click. Let's see if anything happens. I suspect that this won't work. I don't think there's enough of us to make a difference in the web search results, but we could try it. We can see. Where were we ranking? Like number 20, 21, a little lower than that. All right. But in any case, that's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is putting many topics on one site might be bad for you. Can you tell us, Mike, what the documentation says about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And this really falls into an area that I'm really interested in. What Google is doing is they're making site level embeddings. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, embeddings are basically representations of websites or documents or entities or authors in multidimensional space. So basically they're converting all the stuff into numbers. And so what they're doing is they're saying like, okay, here's an embedding that represents your entire site. And so the subjects in there are largely going to be, whatever the core subject matter is. So in your case, audience research, but then they're going to compare a new page against that, the embeddings for that new page. And they're going to say, wait, this has nothing to do with all the other stuff that you're talking about. And so as a result of that, they're like, okay, you're not an expert on this subject. We're not necessarily going to apply the same level of ranking value to this new stuff because of the fact that you don't really talk about this. And so one of the things that can offset this is that they're modeling that expertise on the author level as well, again, using these embeddings. So if you use an author who is, a known expert who writes for some of these sites that you have here, you have a higher likelihood of ranking as a result. You're on mute, Rand. Rand, you're on mute.
Rand, you're in mute.
Of course I am. Someone told me I could use this topics classifier to try and do this for folks who can't see. You can get it if you just go to Chrome:/topics internally, or I'll paste it into the thing there. right? And then you go to the classifier. And so when I classify these, right, it should tell me like what these sites are about. So I'll put in Mike's site and classify, and they know things, right? They know Eater is about restaurants. They know Bon Appetit is about food. Obviously, Mike, you're about internet and software. SparkToro is not about something.
That's crazy.
And we're one of the few sites that I've been able to find that's not about something, right? Like we have no topics associated with us according to Google's API classifier. Granted, this is supposed to be used generally for advertising purposes, right? This is, I think, for the what used to be called AdWords and is now, or AdSense, and is now kind of the display things. But I don't know. It just struck me as odd that we can't rank for anything and we have no topics. And so I think that focus topic thing is probably really important and matters a lot. Let's talk about authors. What is Google saying about authors here?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to the same idea that we're talking about. We don't want to just be using like anonymous authors. We don't want to have random authors. You want to really focus on people that are going to be experts in the things that they're talking about, because Google is leveraging their understanding of authors across the web. So, let's think about like someone like, I don't know, you, for instance, Rand, right? Like you've written obviously a lot on SparkToro. You used to write a lot on Moz. So Google is associating with you with these two subjects. I'm going to imagine that you probably wrote in different other places back in the day as well. Sure. So Google has this like understanding of you where they know you've written a lot about SEO. So whenever you write something about SEO, which I suspect is never going to happen again, they're like, okay, this guy is an expert on this subject. But at the same time, you now have a wealth of other things related to audience research. You have a lot of things about internet marketing and marketing in general across those years. And so they know, like, okay, when you write about one of these subjects, we can trust that this person is writing about them. So what I think we need to be doing, if you want to expand your subject matter, you want to do it in a tangential way where there's still a lot of overlap and whatever it is that you typically talk about. And you also want to leverage expert authors as you expand. And you also don't just want to do one, page like you're doing with the best guide. If you really wanted to rank for food and drink stuff, you would want to do like, 10 pages about that or 20 pages or whatever it is. So you have more coverage for that subject area.
And did I see correctly in the documentation that there's some idea of basically separating sites out or subparts of sites out with topics by either subdomain or subfolder? And so essentially, if we wanted to have a food and drink section on SparkToro, conceivably we could put that on a subdomain or a subfolder and maybe get the topic association. Is that what I was seeing in there?
So there's a lot in the modules that talk about NAFT that talks about things like that, but I don't know that I explicitly saw what you just mentioned, but I saw things that I could infer that they might be doing that down the
So that might be something to test, but not something to rely on. Okay, cool. You busted on this one?
Yeah, I mean, we all know back in the day that, or not even back in the day, probably like 5 years ago, people were just like updating dates, and it helped, right? Like Google was crawling these pages more often. In some cases, they were just ranking better because Google was reconsidering them. But the index works like the Wayback Machine. They're storing copies of your page or versions of your page forever. And there's also some indications in there that they are, for linking purposes specifically, that they are considering the last 20 versions of the page that they have in the index. And it's also how they're considering when was the last significant update, because that directly informs how often they're crawling your pages. So I say all that to say you can't really hide anything from Google by just like quickly making a change, because they just have it forever.
Yeah, interesting. Amanda and I did this with a bunch of our pages when we launched V2 of SparkToro. We had to like go back, throw out the old screenshots, re-describe what the product does. It's no longer Twitter focused. It has all this other data in it now. And Yeah, I have no idea whether Google cared about that, but obviously it was very important for our customers. And it's interesting to think about like how much of an update do I need in order to be relevant again? Because I do see a lot of that, junky stuff in there when I search for dates. Okay, last section here. What should we test doing, Mike? What's on our list?
I mean, definitely zero-click content. Like you've been saying this for years now, right? Like there's so much value here. We now know that there are clear signals that Google is capturing that are directly impacted by this zero-click content. And my favorite example of this is Dollar Shave Club. Like we were all talking about this when we were all on our like content marketing kick, a few years ago. But you can see in the data right here, right? Like the interest in Dollar Shave Club as a company, which is, effectively a composite of like branded terms represented in Google Trends, aligns directly with what their organic top 10 keyword rankings looks like, when we compare these two charts. So the timing on both of these charts is basically the same. So, they weren't doing SEO with this. They were just making a cool ad, which then turned into a lot of search volume around their branded terms and also all the other signals that go with that. So yeah, there's just so much value in doing things from a branding perspective because of all the signals that it creates across Google's ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a wonderful thing. Obviously, Amanda coined this term because all of these platforms are going, clickless. But interesting to see that there's suggestions in the documentation that it might help with SEO too. That YouTube mentions was one of those fascinating ones. I hadn't seen it initially. It came to my attention maybe a couple of weeks after we published our blog post, Mike. But the fact that they're scanning it looked like they were scanning the transcript for mentions and then looking at the words around them, kind of like it looks for anchor text, and then building like an entity confidence score. What would be the like actionable takeaway here?
Yeah, I mean, keyword stuff the hell out of your transcripts, basically. I don't mean that for real, but like, I think that transcripts on YouTube specifically are not something that people prioritize, and it's something that we have, tend to push for because people will come to us for YouTube optimization, and I've always looked at it as like Google needs more text for these pages because they can't solely rely on the videos. I mean, now they can because of the advent of computer vision and the improvements in there and all that. But historically, they couldn't. So it's always been something that we've recommended. But now we have more ammunition to say that it works based on these documents.
So the test here might be like, hey, if you can get to be a guest on other people's YouTube channels, if you can put your own videos on YouTube and talk about the subjects where you're a subject matter expert, mention your brand name, especially if that brand name is associated with the website, it's very possible that like Google creates that entity mention, kind of like they use linkless mentions on the web, and that could have a positive ranking effect.
Yeah, exactly.
So similar story here, right? The mentions without links thing, we just don't know how valuable it is, right?
Yeah, we don't. There's nothing to indicate that it's being used the same way as links in these documents. But again, ingredients, not the recipe. We don't know what they do with it as part of the scoring functions. But at the same time, we do know that there's a lot of mentions in the documentation. So there's inherently some value with respect to the whole entity modeling and them understanding when an entity is talked about and what that entity is related to. So yeah, more mentions is always going to be better in this case.
And obviously this is really good for large language models and AI stuff, right?
Yeah, I've been saying this for a minute as well. Like, I think that we need to be looking at structured data differently in the generative AI space because, all large language models consume everything. And, one of the things that large language models have problems with is the not having facts. So if you provide more facts in the form of structured data, even though Google isn't using it for rich results, it's still valuable to reinforce what they understand about these entities. So stop just being like, oh yeah, I'm going to do FAQ markup because it was showing that rich result in Google. It doesn't do that anymore. And so everyone is stopping or removing that. But, you know, AI overviews can use that. ChatGPT can use that. So you should continue to provide that data.
Yeah. Yeah. This one I'm really curious about. I'm not familiar with this. What's the UGC inaccessible thing?
Yeah, so they have a effort score related to UGC, and so what that tells me is
For folks who don't know the acronym, that's user generated content.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry about that. So, like, let's say you got a bunch of reviews that are completely off topic or clearly spam, made with X rumor, things like that. Google is looking at that and then using that as a component to measure the value of a page. So it could be that these comments are bringing down the score for your page. And so the recommendation that we're making is like, why don't we just test removing it or at least blocking it from Google so we can see like, okay, does this page perform better without the UGC on it?
Yeah, interesting test to run, because you could conceivably make it accessible again if the test doesn't go well.
Exactly. And so this is what that could look like. You know, really, you could, whatever script you're using for getting the UGC on your page, just block it in robots.txt and you're all good.
Huh. Oh, yeah, nice. Long page titles.
Yeah, so we have all historically said like, oh, page title should be 60, 70 characters. I think a lot of what people have said is like, oh yeah, they don't look at anything past that. That's not true. There are no measures of page titles mentioned in the documentation. And to Gary's credit, he's said in the past, like, you know, the 70 character thing is made up by SEOs. And also the more recent documentation, like the public documentation about SEO that Google provides, also says that. And so a lot of the tests that we've run historically have been doing things where we like include more keywords in the page title to make it longer. And every time we've done it, we've seen increases in clicks from organic search.
So this might not even be a test thing. This might be a like, just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, well, I want to be clear. Almost every time we've done it, we've seen results like this, where it's just an increase. So the orange line here is the variance performance. The line in the middle that says clicks, that is when we implemented that test. And every time we do it, it's an increase in clicks from organic search. So the main reason why I think this is happening is because when Google rewrites those page titles, you're giving it more to choose from. And so you have a higher likelihood of mapping to what the user is searching for.
Oh, fascinating. Okay. That makes total sense. Yeah. Huh. Well, I feel a little better about our long page titles on SparkToro, which are often not for SEO. No meta descriptions. Really?
Yeah. I mean, they talk about snippets in there, but you know, because the snippets are how they construct the meta descriptions. But you know, what we would recommend testing is like just remove them, because Google continues to remove them. Like in a lot of these different studies you see, it's like 80% of meta descriptions are rewritten anyway. And so what I tend to recommend to our clients instead is that just use the data no snippet attribute around the stuff that you don't want to be considered for the meta description, because Google, their whole system around nav boost is like, we want to drive more clicks. Like we want to understand better clicks. And so this snippet system is trying to give every page its best opportunity to drive clicks. So I'm just saying, like, let's just remove the meta description entirely.
Yeah, why not? Plus, it's a bunch of work I don't have to do anymore. I love that. I'd rather put it into something human beings are actually going to read. Yeah, how do we test this one? Like, what's the significance threshold here?
Yeah, I think we have to figure it out. So someone actually asked in the chat, like, what do they mean by significant update? I think that's probably going to be, you know, different per content type, different per website, and so on. And so what we're recommending is just like testing different variants until you figure out which one is it. Like how long does it have to be considered a significant update? And the way you would measure that is based on how often Google is recrawling the pages, because again, they're using the significance of the update to give a crawl frequency per page. And so in these examples here, it could be like, hey, let's just try updating the date. Not saying that that's going to work, but you do want to just do something small first to see how well that impacts things. And then after that, you might want to try one section, maybe two sections, and keep going until you see like a more rapid amount of times that Google is crawling those pages.
Huh. Yeah, interesting. Skyscraper, isn't that seemed like it was best practice for a long time, right? Those long recipe sites, those long articles.
I mean, the whole skyscraper thing was always kind of BS because no one actually improved the content. They just copied the content, right? Like the promise was that you look for something that's performing and you make something better. No one made anything better. And so what we found here is that they have a specific attribute scoring the originality of content. And so specifically for shorter content. And that combined with the fact that one of the things that Amit Singhal had worked on prior to Google, like back when he was just like a straight up hardcore IR guy, was this idea called pivoted document normalization. Because what is the obvious thing is that a long form document will outrank a short form document because it has more content in it. And so, Google in this case has like multiple metrics to determine like, is there actual value for short form content? So I say all that to say, like, you don't have to default to making, 5,000 word articles to rank for something. You can rank with shorter content.
Yeah. I mean, certainly it looked to me like, and this is just my, I haven't spent a ton of time in SEO, but it looked to me like some of the recent studies have seen that shorter content is on average doing better than it did historically. And so maybe this is something where there's some controls around this in the last few years. Okay. We are going to wrap up with some Q&A, but look who is coming to Spark Together live for the first time, October 8th in Seattle, Washington. Mike, I'm so excited to have you out to our city. Amanda and I just yesterday signed a contract to get those like fancy SparkToro, like giant foam letters made so we can put them on the stage in 3D. We've got some really cool swag that was designed by Casey's daughter, Reese. And
now I'm thinking about like all the ambergrams for SparkToro so that we can like rearrange.
Oh, rotten Spark. So go ahead and ask Mike your burning questions. Amanda, do you want to run us through these? And I can find the right places in the presentation to go through.
All right, I'm going to look at the Q&A.
And just for reference, folks, we are going long today. We're going a little over our hour time, so we'll probably be here for another 10-15 minutes. Mike has kindly offered to stay and answer questions. Thanks to so many of you for participating heavily. You can use the Q&A tab, and Amanda will prioritize your questions.
Yeah. So a couple folks in the Q&A asked about updating content. So questions like, how long should we wait in between content updates? And is there anything to indicate how often you should update your content?
So I want to take a step back because I think this should be driven by like what your business is trying to do. It shouldn't just be like, let's do this for SEO, right? I think that there is opportunity to better understand this based on how often Google is actually crawling your pages. So log file analysis is so underrated. Getting access to those logs and then just like parsing them out to get a sense of like, okay, is Google crawling this page daily, weekly, monthly? And then based on that, you should determine the cadence of when you should make changes if you're trying to make improvements to the ranking, right? And if it's a keyword that freshness is really important, although we're seeing indications that Google is trying to orient the scoring around freshness in general, but specific keywords have that turned up a bit more. Those are going to be situations where you're going to want to update more often. But again, let your business goals drive this. Don't just do it for SEO.
Smart. All right, we have a question on internal links. Does the leak document discuss internal links? Is it true that internal links with no user clicks would not be evaluated by Google?
Ooh.
So I didn't see anything in there specifically about the user clicks of internal links. But if we, again, just think about how they're looking at the indexing of pages that would cover your internal links as well, right? Like the pages that are considered more valuable would have more value in the internal linking page rank calculations. But beyond that, there's some other
There's some
discussion in
stuff
there.
around. Wasn't there? There's some stuff around the like. Are local is local anchors? Is that an internal link?
Right. That's what I was going to say. The local
Yeah.
anchor specifically related to Penguin, there's some information in there, which basically says that you can't spam yourself via Penguin. So yeah, there's some cool stuff in there, but again, it's based around this idea of local anchors for a given site.
This question's voted a lot on overall content strategy. I guess maybe is there anything else that we haven't covered so far? Like recommendations for overall content strategy? Maybe anything we haven't touched on yet.
Yeah, I mean the big one for me, at least, thinking about this was there's this like combination of stuff of I need to satisfy users. I need to prove that I am a sort of credible author in the space and consistently sort of publish stuff under my name, or even not my name, but Google seems to be able to recognize an author even without you specifically calling out who it is, right? Like they'll figure out who wrote it because we all have identifying marks in how we write, and making sure that the content that we write about is consistently on a similar topic over time, so that you sort of get that triad of things together. That was like the big, like, oh, okay, I can see why all this stuff ranks. I can see why whatever this recipe site is ranking because this author is always writing about pasta with mushrooms. And so no wonder they rank for the pasta with mushrooms searches, even though it's kind of a small site. Like that's their sector.
Yeah, I mean, I think big picture, it really reinforces make great content. I hate to say it, but the reality is that we are looking for, or they are looking for signals that are created by content that people actually want, right? Like when in SEO, we're thinking like, how do we game these signals? The way you game it is by making like 10x content, like things that people are going to click and stay on for a long time. So I don't think that there's.
I want to agree with you, Mike, but I think I strongly feel that Google is not putting the best content forward. They are putting the content that is on popular domains with a long history of publishing on that topic from authors that they might recognize who get lots of engagement. And that is not the same as the best content. And so that's fair. I really worry about this advice to like make the best content because we make the best food and drink gift guide and we don't rank for shit. No offense.
All right, let me clarify. So I agree with what you're saying, but I also think that when you think about the whole idea of a brand, like the signals that they're looking for align better for a brand, right? Like they're looking for clicks. You're going to click on a brand you recognize. They're looking for links. A brand is more likely to be linked to. They're looking for content relevance and robust content and very, like you said, like high quality authors. A brand can afford that. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that it is effectively a pay to play thing. Like you've got to have the footprint across the web in order to rank here, but also getting that footprint is a function of making great content.
Yeah. I think there's also there's also something to be said for if you can find a niche or a topic for which there actually isn't a lot of content on it already and write about that, then you'll get found. There's still opportunities like that. And I'm saying that as someone, I have a secret blog that I don't have a ton of content on it, so it doesn't get a ton of traffic, but I do rank like in the top 3 for the keywords that I went after because nobody else, and they're decent volume keywords. I think a couple hundred, anyway, searches per month. But anyway, the point is like no one else has written about this topic, and it's not like a crazy like, whoa, you invented a topic. I didn't invent the topic. It's like pretty bland, but no one else has written about it. And so I rank in the top 3 for it because the content is actually new. But yeah,
I think this is a really great point, Amanda. And when I think about our content strategy, a lot of it is around doing things like measuring dark social traffic. We don't rank anywhere for this, which is infuriating because every one of these cites our research. Not all of them link to us, but when we do stuff like this, we often will take a thing we think people are interested in, a topic we think people are interested in, but no one's searching for, and make that our content centric stuff, as opposed to trying to go after things where I know we'll have no chance of ranking. Right? Like SparkToro can't rank for its own. I mean, I think this is embarrassing to me, right? But Google 0-click searches is research that we obviously pioneered, that I published on for many years. We're nowhere, but every one of these cites our research and links to us, but we're just not
they're using
a
their
brand.
term.
Sorry?
They're using Amanda's term. Like no one called these 0-click searches before y'all. That's so wild.
Right. Yeah.
You created
so
a branded term basically that your brand doesn't rank for.
Yeah, I gotta do more brand stuff when I do this. More questions. Let's try and do lightning round. What do we think?
okay.
Yeah. In the meantime, Ian just said that you rank better for that food and drink query now. You're on page 2.
Well, yeah, I mean, so you get a few hundred people searching and clicking. It's easy to like quickly move up the rankings, but it falls back down pretty fast too. So if everybody's not searching for it and clicking on it 2 days from now, like we're going to fall back down.
Keep coming back. Okay. Nancy asks, did the leaked docs include Google Business Profile?
There is some discussion of local there, but I don't do much local, so I didn't dig into heavily. So I don't remember what it said.
I remember correctly. I think is it the Near Media guys published a really good.
Yes. That one was great.
Yeah. So this local search implications of the Google API leak. Our friend David Mim, who is someone I just love to pieces, he wrote a great piece about this. I would recommend it. Darren is also in the comments. Darren, I don't know if you've got other resources, but I would point to WhiteSpark and Darren as being, obviously leaders in the local search field.
Cool. Let's see. And any interesting or new findings for e-commerce websites?
There's some stuff in there on Google Shopping, but again, I didn't really dig into that just yet. I don't think anyone else has like done anything. What do you call it? Like a deep dive, but that could be one of the next things that we do.
Yeah, I would love to see an analysis of that. There is. I did look for shopping the other day, and there's these fun things around like, oh, does the brand have an entity associated with it, and then like, is that connected to the intent of the shopper search and merchant ID stuff? But you can, this is not just for Google search. It's local is in here, YouTube is in here, shopping is in here, whatchamacallit, Google News is in here. Like, there's amazing stuff in here.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. How do you change the topic of a website if it is coming up wrong?
My understanding is the bad news is isn't that a natural language processing thing that the Google Ads API does? Are we talking about the Chrome topics now? So this Chrome topics internal classifier, right? If you plug in, HubSpot, and HubSpot's like, oh no, we didn't want to be advertising and marketing, we wanted to be email or whatever it is. Well, you better write a few thousand articles that get popular about email and maybe, remove some of the ones that are popular about advertising and marketing. And then however long I don't know how often this Ads API updates.
So that's what I was going to say. Based on the other things and how often they update, it seems like everything is on a rolling 28 days. So even if you do make the change, you shouldn't expect it to be immediate.
Okay, wait 28 days. That's great advice. Why don't we do like 2 more questions, Amanda?
Okay, Darren Shaw asked about, is there anything about using Android data?
Yeah. I don't know specifically, but yeah, there's a whole section in there of modules related to Android stuff.
My read of it so far, and someone who's more technical could dig into it, but my read of it so far is that there's lots of data about how Android search works, and how to preference stuff inside Android. But I didn't see we use Android data, like the click stream from Android is part of how we figure out rankings the way they use Chrome. So,
well, they do talk about Android being a source in the Plex book, but I didn't see anything in here just yet.
Yeah. And that could be just because it's in the Chrome in total metric, right? The Android clickstream could come to the Chrome, what they call Chrome in the features here. So just, don't assume that, because you see something in here, we definitely know that, just like we don't know necessarily what localized app name they're labeling it for us, right? But like if you look for all the Chrome data, like we don't know exactly which ones. We don't know whether they filter out paid clicks in Chrome data or not. They might not. But number of unique visits in Chrome, like, well, that's pretty freaking obvious, right? But what do they filter out? We don't know.
All right, a last question here, which got a couple upvotes just now. Is there anything about ranking for small websites or new domains taking longer than big websites?
So there's two things related to that. There is something to indicate that a domain could be sandboxed based on its host age. And then there's a attribute called small personal site. And there's no indication what they do with small personal site, but based on what we're seeing with small personal sites losing a lot of traffic lately, it doesn't seem like they're doing anything to support small personal sites. So again, I think that a lot of these measures that they're looking at are kind of benefit the bigger sites that are easily creating those measures, which kind of like squeezes out the smaller sites inherently.
Yeah, I mean, whenever Google is like, we have nothing like a sandbox. There's nothing called a sandbox. We don't do that. And you're like, host age. The data are used in Twiddler to sandbox fresh spam. I don't know. The number of swear words I want to say to people at Google who just, it's infuriating. All right. Let's go back to what our actual talk here. Mike, I want to thank you so much for the incredible work you did, not only today and helping us put this together and giving us this extra 20 minutes and being so generous, but also diagnosing and going through these documents. I know that you spent a weekend away from your family doing that after I called you late on a Friday night and you were at the playground with Zora and Glory. And it just meant the world to me to have you as a resource on this. Everyone, if you need help with your Google rankings, especially if you're an enterprise, you should give this guy a call. You should come to Spark Together because you're going to see him and some other incredible people, including Darren Shaw, who is in the comments on stage. Amanda and I would be thrilled to host you. You will get the recordings, Amanda. That'll be like in the next few hours.
Yes.
Excellent. And thanks for including me.
Thrilled to have you. This recording will also be available on a URL if you want to share it with other folks too.
Yep. All right. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Rand. And thank you, friends.
Thanks for joining us. Take care.